know what you can't know. In other words, anything that we know, we either have to experience for ourselves or somebody has to tell us about it. And so there is nothing in existence in humanity that has ever been original. Not totally. It can't be. So all ideas are an amalgamation. They're, as Einstein called, combinatory play. So taking together different ideas, different materials, literally anything that exists, and assembling them together in a way that is not what it would be naturally. So we call these things things. So Rousseau talks about 3 different types of educators in the world. The first is nature, which is, in my definition, anything that is not manipulated by humans or originally, or have been left alone long enough to restore itself in its natural means. So if this thing grows in this place and a human had little or no direct influence, obviously, like with the amount of humans in the world, there is always some level of human influence on essentially everything on the planet. But the farther removed from human contact or human influence something is, the more natural it is. Okay, so that's the definition for natural. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau in Emile establishes 3 types of educators. Nature, things, which are anything that is manipulated by human beings, that is not, it's things that are farther removed than the definition that I established for nature. So if this is the 0 point, nature's this way and human influence is this way. So the farther it's this way, the closer it is to nature. The more influence human it is, the closer it is to what Rousseau establishes as a thing. And then the third type of educator is human beings. So human beings arguably are the things that are most in control. Like, we can control humans, we can control ourselves, but ultimately, obviously, you can't control every little thing of a whole entire lifetime of a person. So the most influential, though, the most affected by humans is humans. So humanity or society, things, and nature are the 3 types of educators. Now, what Rousseau also says is that the things and the humans should be brought into terms of that coincides with nature, because essentially nature is the least affected by human beings, and therefore if it can thrive naturally, different meaning of nature and natural, but if they're essentially giving us a rule book of, like, we should not impose on this natural, what is natural, as much as possible. You know, like, we should try not to hurt trees, we should only take what we need, you know, just being environmentally stewardship. So these are the 3 types of education. So the idea of creativity is up until, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago, I don't know the specific date, but the word create or creation was only assigned to something that is wholly out, that is wholly out of human control. So by God or gods or whatever. So some higher being that is non-human is the only thing that can truly create. I cannot go poof and make something appear. But this is what truly creating is. So since humans can only manipulate what is already here, ideas, materials, whatever, that is not creating. That is making. We are making something out of something else. This idea came from a combination of these ideas. So ultimately, we can't know what we can't know. In other words, we also cannot create. So the interesting idea is, if we can't make up anything, everything else is an amalgamation of what already exists, then the idea of God or higher beings had to be introduced somewhere, like spirits and things like that. Like, what we can't make things up, we cannot create. Therefore, the idea had to come from somewhere. So the mere fact that we can conceive of a God is a murmur of the truth that there has to be a God. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a consideration for it. And essentially, in multiple forms and around the world, it's so deeply ingrained in us as humans that it is inescapable, even for those who are atheistic or choose not to subscribe to one religion or another, but ultimately agnostic. The fact that the thought of God exists and has persisted so long is evidence that there has to be a God. We can't know what we can't know, so there has to be a God. Now, this provides an interesting idea, because we're talking about something that is beyond human understanding. Like, we cannot understand the multitude of facets of what God is. And we try to assign it to what we can understand in human terms. You know, we can only speak of what we know. So even while God was existing alongside people, you know, still in communication. I mean, this is the whole story of the Garden of Eden, Noah, all those ideas. Like, there's still this kind of communication between God and man. And as society and humanity expounded, got bigger, the connection or understanding with God was lost and is lost, except for those who practice the idea of the existence of a God. So this gives justification for and purpose to Jesus in the Christian faith. God being literally embound by being a human being. Like, this is the ideal. This is the personification of God, literally. And so, because Jesus was true man and true God, he was able to show all of humanity how to exist. This is how you look at things in practice. It's practical. This is Christianity, practicality 101. You know, like, we're not talking about theory or whatnot. we've got rules, the Ten Commandments, and we've got the effects of God when humanity didn't understand God's translation. It's really what happened. Like, people used to spend time with God, close to nature, if you will, and listening to what nature says. But the farther humanity gets away from nature and the closer humanity sticks to humanity, the less it can hear of God, from God. So this leads us to the understanding of the purpose of Jesus. So Jesus is the practical terms that came along. Okay, man's not listening to God anymore because it can't understand God, because removal from nature. There needs to be some way that man can understand, because man cannot know what man cannot know. So how could man know how to enact God's will without a map, you know? And that's what the Bible is. That's what Jesus is. That's what God is, you know? Like the Trinity. There it is. Like, all of these means are ways for us to understand the existence of God and ways of living in preservation of self and harmony, ultimately. Yeah, harmony, unity. Like, this whole, we're all part of this same thing. Because that's what war, that's what all this hate of this time era, 2022, 2021, post-COVID era, the hatred comes from focusing on humanity and the worries of humans, and as far away from nature, from God, from seeing how we all relate that we have ever been in history. So it's no wonder that we're having the social, the governmental problems that we have. We are going into an arc, you know, like, this is played out so many times, particularly in the Bible, but also throughout history. Like, the Greeks honored gods, and then they got farther away from gods, and then their Greek society started falling, and then they got swept in by the Romans. The Romans literally took their ideas of gods and whatnot. They prospered, they studied them, and they subscribed, but then Rome got too big for its britches, and then it demolished itself. And the Etruscans, the Egyptians, and like even Christians do this. Like the Catholic Church was a perfect example, along with the Rome, like the papacy, and this hierarchy of like, I want to be recognized, and the focus becomes less on God's teachings and more on human endeavor, human wants, human foibles, the short term. So why are we not taking this testament through recapitulation, you know, like replaying it in different forms, different ways throughout history? And here we are at the top of this same arc where humanity is stopped its focus on God and put its faith in humanity. I mean, we're children. We're just running around and like we're just squabbling amongst ourselves, and we have lost sight on what our purpose is and what God's purpose is for us, and this understanding of the way to live harmoniously, if nothing else. And we've seen this coming. You know, we had the Enlightenment, where like the idea of God was too existential for humanity to understand. So let's stop worrying about this and going back to like a humanistic view of what's just right in front of us, what's best for people. But when you are a person and looking at people, how are you supposed to see anything higher? It's like this idea of the Flatlander, the novel about the 2D object that comes in contact with a 3D object, and only the 3D object can lift up the 2D object to see what 2D really means. And likewise, that's the Jesus in this novella. The idea of the 3D object talking to the 2D is like Jesus talking to normal human beings. When God's the bigger, the 4D, the inconceivable to us. This is the link between these realms of understanding, and yet we are betting on ourselves that we know better. It's Plato's The Cave. This is not a new concept. Like, Plato was talking about this. The idea of escaping from this cave that you've been locked in your entire life, and all you had seen was shadows, and now to see things in a reality, those shadows become fakes, and to understand what is real also is the understanding that we can't know everything. So we need to understand that other means, God, Jesus, are the only way we can truly understand the existence beyond ourselves. So we can't know what we can't know. Therefore, we either need to gain more experience, which from our level we cannot, or something needs to teach us, something that understands this realm way better than we could. So, yeah, Jesus is always the answer. Jesus saves. Either in an excessively literal sense of like, this is, maybe some humans were super smart and able to figure these archetypes out. I mean, be the originators of this thought. But ultimately, why would you reject that? Like, even from a logical standpoint of practicality, why would you reject a playbook on how to lead a good life? And the problem is that there's going to be hard truths. There's going to be things that everybody doesn't like. And because we're human, and because we have our foibles, we will never be able to fully be able to fulfill this idea of perfection. And again, this leads to the purpose of Jesus. Like, just try to be this way, you know. I'll take care of you in the long run, but you got to believe in me. You got to at least aim for it, you know. Faith without works is dead. Like, you can't. We all sin, but we can all still strive for the best that we can be. Follow the playbook, the Bible, Jesus' teachings, the 10 Commandments, and yeah, we might falter, but we still try to aim. It's the blatant disregard of, there's too many things in this that make me feel bad about myself. Sorry, hard truths, but they're all with good intentions. Like, it might hurt your feelings, but if you follow it, it will make your life better. Duh. So it's like, for example, a girl or a guy fall madly in love with each other, or a different person, whatever, and the significant other ends up beating them. And for whatever reason, the other person is like, but I love them and they love me. You don't know what it's like between us and blah, blah, blah. Like, I still love them even though I know that this person is beating me and tearing me down and making me feel lesser of a person, dehumanizing me. So the hard truth is that person needs to be told, you need to get away from this guy. And ultimately, the person receiving the hard truth has three options: to reject the suggestion of the person that is trying to help them, or they embody it, or they resent it all. You know, like, yes, no, maybe, or there's another way. So ultimately, the yes in this scenario will make that person better, but they rather deal with the pain, the small pains and suffering that are long-term, than doing one big pain and separating themselves from this negative person and going through the finding somebody else. Why stay in those situations? Why not make things better? So the Bible, Jesus' teachings, God, are all saying the hard truths. The things that humans, if you strive for this, your life will be better. But instead, there are so many people that are blatantly rejecting it and saying, I'm throwing away the whole kit and caboodle because there's too many things that make me feel bad about myself. And like, how do you ever self-improve when you're not taking those, breaking those thresholds of what can harm you? But it's recognizing that, like smoking, drinking, you know, these things that give us immediate gratification in that moment, but ultimately are not going to be good for us in the long run. They're just short-term fixes for, if you would get rid of them altogether, your life would be better. We really look at things as a short-term, and like, we take so long to grow up. I mean, you talk about the people in World War II that went through immense things that we can't even imagine. They real people, like real men and women, that their kids going off to war and seeing atrocities that we can't even imagine, so that we can have the freedom to bitch. That's how we've repaid them. That's how we repaid freedom, is we turned into a bunch of whiny little babies, just weak and pathetic, squabbling amongst ourselves, and then we blame it on them because we're too weak and pathetic to take our own responsibilities. And that's what it comes down to, is here's the playbook of good. This is good, but we have to accept that we suck. We got to do better, and we need to try and do our best. And that doesn't mean that we can do it right now. We're going to screw up a lot, but the more we strive towards it, the better off we'll be. We'll just be better for everybody. And we will. It's not a question. We will get hurt in the way while we're trying to be better for people, because there's always going to be people that are lower than us. And I'm not talking beneath us. I'm talking about less developed in the hierarchy or of thresholds. Like, I had to go through this suffering, but I learned from it. But they're still suffering. They're still not, they haven't figured out how to exceed that threshold. Our hardest things to come to grips with are the hard truths. We need to be able to recognize that in ourselves, and sometimes that takes other people to say it. but it should always be for the effort of making better, not for being violent or denigrating or trying to just hurt people. The criticism comes with the solution. This is what I see. This is what I see. I know how to make this better. Here's how you make this better. But it's going to suck to make it better. You're going to have to work to make it better. And until the entirety of humanity can decide this or figure this out, we'll never be free. If you want independence, you need to be okay with yourself, and you need to be able to work better. Otherwise, we will never exceed the worst of us. We need to help everybody, and everybody needs to work. As a society, we are our own threshold. The worst of us hold back the best of us. We're a team. Sorry. And if we have people that are weak, we need to uplift them, teach them their work, and teach them how to do it, and not do it for them. That's not the job. We can't change anybody else's heart or opinion, but we can show them the way. This is the way. In other words, we can't know what we can't know. Do more, do better.